Davis welcomes listeners. Where are you listening from tonight? Hints that tonight's mystery began at a seaside hotel where one guest vanished between breakfast and tea. Now, settle in. Let's begin the case of the vanishing guest. Late summer. The Grand Seaview Hotel gleamed above the waterline, proud and new, yet pretending to be old. Its white pillars caught the sun, and the sea breeze played with the flags outside. Inside, everything smelled of lemon polish, linen, and chatter. Lady Bantry had decided the hotel needed proper attention. A charity weekend, she called it. Guests from the village, a few from London, funds for the church roof, and the library clock. A respectable cause. And, of course, gossip disguised as goodwill. Miss Marple sat near the window, knitting pale blue wool. Her hands moved without hurry, each loop exact. The pattern was delicate. A baby's bonnet, perhaps, but her eyes weren't on the yarn. They followed the room. Every voice, every pause, every glance. The tables were full. Mr. and Mrs. Drayton, new to the village, discussing their dear little spaniel. Mrs. Pierce, the vicar's wife, balancing teacups with the air of someone correcting the room by example. And in the corner, two young men from the local paper, laughing too loudly for comfort. The band played a slow tune, something meant to sound cheerful but tired by repetition. The sea beyond the window was calm. Too calm, perhaps. A tide that waited. Miss Marple always believed the sea held secrets just as villages did, quiet, patient, and watchful. Her companion, Lady Bantry, waved a gloved hand toward the buffet. "Try the crab sandwiches, Jane. They're frightfully fresh." Marple smiled faintly. "Freshness is not always assurance, my dear. Sometimes it only means something was caught quickly." Lady Bantry laughed, missing the tone. The waiter approached a thin man, quick hands, sharp eyes. He carried a tray of teens, lemonade and scones. Behind him, the service door swung softly on its hinges. From beyond came the clatter of plates and the mutter of staff voices. Miss Marple noticed the door opened and closed too often. Someone moving in and out who didn't belong to the hotel rhythm. At the next table sat Mr. Hollis, middle-aged, well-groomed, the kind of man who had once been important somewhere else. His clothes were new, but his shoes weren't. He smiled when spoken to but never asked questions. He ate little. He drank tea as if it were medicine. And every few minutes, always the same, he glanced at the service door. Once, twice, a third time. The rhythm of it caught Miss Marple's attention. She followed his gaze. Only a shadow moved behind that door, a shape, then gone. She lowered her knitting and spoke softly. "Odd," she murmured, as if he expects someone not on the list. Lady Bantry didn't hear. The band had started a new song, livelier, though no one wanted to dance. Outside, a gull cried and vanished into the light. Inside, the waiter dropped a fork. Small sound. Stillness followed. Miss Marple tied off her thread and laid the knitting aside. The sea remained calm, but her mind wasn't. Something unseen had entered the hotel. Not through the front door, through the service one. And someone was already waiting for it. Tea hour. The corridor smelled of polish and sea air. Voices floated from the dining room below, soft, harmless chatter. Then one sharp scream. It cut through everything. A woman's voice, high and breaking. Then silence. The housemaid stumbled out of room 12. Face drained, hands shaking. She tried to speak, but only gasped. Someone shouted for the manager. Doors opened. Guests appeared, half curious, half afraid. The corridor filled with whispers. Miss Marple rose from her chair by the window. Her knitting slid quietly into her bag. She moved toward the stairs, slow, certain. Lady Bantry followed, skirts brushing the wall. The maid clung to the banister, white as linen. "Room 12, she whispered. He's gone." The manager arrived, puffing, sweating through his collar. "Gone?" he repeated. "What do you mean, gone?" "The gentleman, Mr. Hollis." Her hand trembled as she pointed. "He was there. I left his tray. Then I heard." She stopped, looked at the closed door. The brass number glinted under the corridor light. No sound inside. No movement. The handle refused to turn. Locked. From within. The manager knocked. "Mr. Hollis, are you unwell?" No reply. He pressed his ear against the wood. Nothing but quiet. The maid began to cry. Miss Marple's eyes drifted down the hall. A waiter at the far end froze under her gaze. He turned away too quickly. She noted that. "Break it," someone said. The manager fetched a key that didn't fit. Then his shoulder. Wood splintered. The door swung open. Stillness. A tray stood on the table, half a cup of tea, untouched scone, sugar spilled in a neat arc. Curtains moved faintly in the wind. Window open wide. Balcony door ajar. No Mr. Hollis. No struggle. No sign of exit. His clothes lay folded. Suitcase under the chair. Hat on the stand. Wallet and keys untouched. The maid pressed her palms to her mouth. "I swear he was here. Just 10 minutes ago." Lady Bantry looked toward the balcony. The wind carried the smell of salt and wet metal. A gull's cry echoed from below. On the balcony rail, one footprint. Bare. Damp. Left facing outward. Inspector Slack hadn't yet arrived, but Miss Marple didn't need him. She stepped forward carefully, studying the pattern of dust and moisture near the railing. A thin film of sea spray covered the stone, except where the print had pressed it away. "He didn't fall," she said quietly. Lady Bantry blinked. "Jane?" Miss Marple traced the outline of the footprint with her eyes. Then the curve of the rail. "Falling," she murmured, "leaves panic behind. This," she paused, "is decision." The corridor behind them had grown crowded again, guests whispering, staff murmuring about police. Miss Marple turned from the window, her face calm, almost tender, but her eyes were sharp. "Send for Inspector Slack," she said softly, "and tell him not to bother with his heart. Seizure theory." She looked once more at the open sea. "The man is not dead," she added. "Not yet. Tea hour." The corridor smelled of polish and sea air. Voices floated from the dining room below, soft, harmless chatter. Then one sharp scream. It cut through everything. A woman's voice, high and breaking. Then silence. The housemaid stumbled out of room 12. Face drained, hands shaking. She tried to speak, but only gasped. Someone shouted for the manager. Doors opened. Guests appeared, half curious, half afraid. The corridor filled with whispers. Miss Marple rose from her chair by the window. Her knitting slid quietly into her bag. She moved toward the stairs, slow, certain. Lady Bantry followed, skirts brushing the wall. The maid clung to the banister, white as linen. "Room 12, she whispered. He's gone." The manager arrived, puffing, sweating through his collar. "Gone," he repeated. "What do you mean, gone?" "The gentleman, Mr. Hollis." Her hand trembled as she pointed. "He was there. I left his tray. Then I heard." She stopped, looked at the closed door. The brass number glinted under the corridor light. No sound inside. No movement. The handle refused to turn. Locked. From within. The manager knocked. "Mr. Hollis, are you unwell?" No reply. He pressed his ear against the wood. Nothing but quiet. The maid began to cry. Miss Marple's eyes drifted down the hall. A waiter at the far end froze under her gaze. He turned away too quickly. She noted that. "Break it," someone said. The manager fetched a key that didn't fit. Then his shoulder. Wood splintered. The door swung open. Stillness. A tray stood on the table, half a cup of tea, untouched scone, sugar spilled in a neat arc. Curtains moved faintly in the wind. Window open wide. Balcony door ajar. No Mr. Hollis. No struggle. No sign of exit. His clothes lay folded. Suitcase under the chair. Hat on the stand. Wallet and keys untouched. The maid pressed her palms to her mouth. "I swear he was here. Just 10 minutes ago." Lady Bantry looked toward the balcony. The wind carried the smell of salt and wet metal. A gull's cry echoed from below. On the balcony rail, one footprint. Bare. Damp. Left facing outward. Inspector Slack hadn't yet arrived, But Miss Marple didn't need him. She stepped forward carefully, studying the pattern of dust and moisture near the railing. A thin film of sea spray covered the stone, except where the print had pressed it away. "He didn't fall," she said quietly. Lady Bantry blinked. "Jane?" Miss Marple traced the outline of the footprint with her eyes, then the curve of the rail. "Falling," she murmured, "leaves panic behind. This," she paused, "is decision." The corridor behind them had grown crowded again. Guests whispering, staff murmuring about police. Miss Marple turned from the window, her face calm, almost tender, but her eyes were sharp. "Send for Inspector Slack," she said softly, "and tell him not to bother with his heart. Seizure theory." She looked once more at the open sea. "The man is not dead," she added. "Not yet. Morning. Fog over the bay." The hotel quiet, almost shy after last night's commotion. Guests whispered behind newspapers. The word missing hung in the air like the smell of salt and soap. Inspector Slack called the staff to the lounge. He wanted statements, quick and tidy. Miss Marple sat near the corner, knitting again, listening more than watching. Every word mattered, every pause meant something. The waitress was first. Young, nervous, clutching her apron. "I never entered room 12, she said. Her voice trembled, but her eyes were steady. "I only carried the tray as far as the corridor. Tom the porter took it the rest of the way." Slack scribbled. "Did you see Mr. Hollis?" "No, sir. I just heard him speaking to someone." She swallowed hard. Then the door closed. The porter stepped forward next. Older, broader, sure of himself. He spoke with pride, like a man who wanted to sound useful. "I took the hot water up," he said. "3:30 sharp." Slack frowned. "Half past?" "Yes, sir. I remember, because the lobby clock had just chimed." "Did you see him?" "No, sir. Door was closed, but I heard a man cough." He shifted his cap nervously. Then the maid screamed a bit later. Slack compared the two notes. Waitress 3:10, porter 3:30. 20 minutes apart. Same tray, same door. Two different truths. He sighed. "One of you's wrong." "Which?" Both swore they were right. The waitress near tears. The porter red-faced. Slack rubbed his temple. "People never agree on time," he muttered. "Clocks don't lie," said the porter stiffly. Marple's eyes flicked upward. "Which clock, my dear?" she asked. The room turned toward her. "The one in the lobby, I suppose," the porter said. "The one above the desk." "Yes," said the waitress quickly. "That's the clock we all use." Marple nodded slowly. "Ah, the hotel clock." She rose, quiet, unhurried. They watched her walk to the reception desk. She studied the face of the clock. Second hand steady. Tick soft, but sure. She looked at her own small watch. Then back again. 7 minutes slow, she said. Calm, factual. Not accusation, just truth. Slack frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" She returned to her seat. "Only this," she said gently. "If one tells time by that clock, their 3:10 becomes 3:17. She looked at the porter. "And your 3:30 becomes 3:23. Slack blinked. Still 7 minutes apart. "Indeed," she said. "But 7 minutes slow, for everyone changes where truth begins." The room stayed silent. Outside, the foghorn moaned once, long and low. Marple resumed her knitting. The rhythm calm, precise. Then she whispered, "Not for Slack, not for anyone." "Truth shifts," she said softly, "when time does." Slack glanced at her, irritated but uneasy. He didn't understand it yet, but she did. One of them had lied. Not by words, by minutes. Next morning, the fog had lifted, but the air still felt heavy. Breakfast smelled of coffee, salt, and nerves. Guests spoke softly, pretending calm. No one mentioned room 12, but everyone was thinking about it. Miss Marple entered quietly. Her knitting was tucked away. Her eyes moved first, not her feet. The dining room was half full. Same faces, same chatter, except one seat, empty. Mr. Hollis's chair, still pulled out slightly, as if waiting. The napkin folded too neatly, the cup untouched. On the table, yesterday's newspaper, folded once. Exact. A page open to the shipping news. Marple moved closer. The headline mentioned departures, steamers, leaving Southampton. One bound for France, another for Lisbon. Her hand brushed the paper. The margin was torn, cleanly, deliberately. She frowned, not the careless tear of a reader. Straight edge, as if done with a ruler or knife. She lifted it. The tear ran through the sailing schedule. One line missing entirely. A name, a time, gone. Lady Bantry joined her. Still no sign of him? Marple shook her head. Not yet, but someone made sure he looked gone long before he was. Bantry blinked. I beg your pardon? Marple pointed at the paper. Absence takes rehearsal, my dear. This is a performance. Slack came in, chewing toast. He hated questions before tea. Now what are we looking at? Yesterday's shipping list, Marple said. Someone tore out a section, likely the one he wanted us to notice missing. Slack rolled his eyes. People tear papers every day. Yes, she said, but not in straight lines. He leaned over, indifferent. Nothing here proves a thing. She smiled faintly. Then you'll enjoy what's in his coat. Slack frowned. What coat? The one still hanging in his room. They went upstairs together. The air in room 12 was colder now. Window closed. Curtains still swayed from the breeze. His coat remained on the chair, folded at the cuff. Marple reached into the inner pocket. Her fingers found paper. She drew out a small strip edge clean, matching the tear. The print aligned perfectly with the gap on the table copy. Slack grunted. So he kept the piece he tore. That's your mystery? Not mystery, Marple replied. Intention. He stared. What's the difference? Intention waits, she said softly. Mystery hides. There's a difference between disappearing and planning to be found. Slack scowled. You think he planned this? I think, she said, laying the torn paper flat, that someone rehearsed his absence, down to the minute, down to the tear. She set both pieces together on the table. The lines met clean. Perfect fit. She tapped it once with a fingertip. He didn't vanish, she whispered. He followed directions. Slack said nothing. Outside, gulls circled the water. Inside, Miss Marple watched the print shimmer under the light. One missing line, one missing man. And now, no such thing as coincidence. The call came just after noon. The gardener had found something. He stood at the back gate of the hotel, hat in hand, face pale, from the wind. Down by the cliff path, miss, he said. Footprints. Bare ones, then gone. Inspector Slack followed, muttering about wasted time. Miss Marple walked beside him, her steps light, her eyes everywhere. The sea roared below, steady and cold. Gulls circled low, restless. The tide was coming in, pressing against the rocks. They reached the edge of the path. The soil was damp from the night's fog. A line of prints led from the grass to the sand. Small, neat, unmistakable. Bare feet. Human. Slack crouched and squinted. Could be anyone's, he said. Children play here. The gardener shook his head. No children this week, sir. Too close to the drop. Marple bent lower. Her gaze traced each impression carefully. Not a child, she murmured. Heels narrow, toes even. Adult, male. The trail stopped at the edge of the beach. Beyond that, nothing. The sea had erased it. Slack stood up, brushing his knees. Walked straight into the tide. That explains your missing guest. Marple didn't answer. She stooped, touched the ground, and lifted her fingers slowly. Grains clung to her skin. Not sand alone. Crystals white, coarse, dry. She rubbed them gently between her thumb and forefinger, then brought them to her nose. Salt, she said. Slack sighed. Yes, Miss Marple. It's the seaside. Amazing discovery. She didn't react. This isn't sea salt, she said quietly. He frowned. What else would it be? She pinched more from the ground. Look closer, Inspector. The texture is fine, uniform. Sea salt carries moisture, a faint scent of shells. This, she held it out, is dry, refined. Kitchen salt. Slack hesitated. You're saying someone salted the beach? Marple nodded. Not the beach. The prints. The gardener crossed himself. For what purpose? To hide them, she said. To confuse shape and pressure. You see, when you scatter dry salt over fresh marks, the surface hardens. Light glare masks detail. Under sun, the outline dissolves, but timing matters. She straightened, brushing her hands. This was done this morning, just before the tide reached here. Slack looked down again, uneasy now. The prints faded into brightness, half swallowed by salt. Too deliberate, she added softly. The wind caught her hat brim, snapping it like a flag. Slack turned toward the horizon. You think Hollis faked his own trail? Marple's voice stayed calm. Perhaps. Or someone wished us to believe he did. They stood in silence. The sea hissed against the stones below. Marple watched the water rise, slow and patient. Salt grains glittered around her shoes, refusing to melt. She whispered to herself, almost absently, real footprints tell truth. False ones fear it. Slack looked at her sideways. You speak in puzzles, Miss Marple. She smiled faintly. Only because the answers prefer whispers, Inspector. Then she turned back toward the hotel. The tide erased another line behind them, but not from her mind. Afternoon light slipped across the corridor. Room 12 stood open again. No one wanted to clean it. No one wanted to look too long at the balcony. Miss Marple stepped inside first. Her pace was slow, deliberate. Inspector Slack followed, arms folded, already sighing. Still chasing phantoms, are we? He muttered. She ignored him. Her attention was on the latch. Small, brass, polished from years of hands, it hung slightly crooked. When she lifted it, it stuck halfway. The hinge outside groaned. Old metal protesting recent strain. She leaned closer. A thin scratch ran down the outer edge. Fresh, silver showed through the paint. She touched it lightly. The line caught the light like a cut. Someone worked this from outside, she said. Slack rolled his eyes. Or the sea air corroded it. Everything rusts here. Rust, she answered. Doesn't leave straight marks. She stepped onto the balcony. The wind tugged at her hat. The rail was damp, but the floor near the door was dry. Someone had wiped it. Recently. Her eyes moved to the corner where the hinge met the wall. Something clung there, tiny, frayed, almost invisible. She pinched it gently. A thread. Blue. She held it up. It fluttered in the breeze. Same shade as the hotel uniforms. Not from the curtains, not from the sea. Slack gave a dry laugh. Coincidence. This place is crawling with uniforms. Marple turned to him, her voice calm. Coincidences, Inspector, tend to travel in packs. He blinked. What's that supposed to mean? That one rarely comes alone. If you find one, expect company. She examined the latch again. The screw on the inner side was faintly loosened. Enough for movement, not enough for notice. Her mind fit the pattern together, thread, latch, hinge, salt. Small things, too small for chance. Slack watched her, uneasy now. You think one of the staff climbed up here? The height argues against it, she said. But not the motive. The latch could be looped with wire. A clever hand could lock it from outside. He frowned. Why go through that trouble? To sell a story, she said simply. A locked room. A vanishing man. Perfect theater. The wind shifted, bringing the smell of seaweed and polish. Marple held the thread one last moment, then folded it into her handkerchief. Keep that, Slack said. We'll test it. She smiled faintly. No need. I already know its answer. He scowled. You enjoy this, don't you? She looked toward the water. Understanding is not enjoyment, Inspector. It's duty. They went back inside. Slack wrote in his notebook without enthusiasm. Marple glanced once more at the door, then the latch. Every scratch told its own truth. As they left, she spoke half to herself. Locks never lie. People do. The laundry room sat behind the kitchens. Warm, steamy, filled with the rhythm of irons and the hiss of water. Sheets hung like ghosts from lines. Uniforms piled in neat stacks. Order everywhere. Miss Marple entered quietly. The laundry mistress, Mrs. Crail, looked up, surprised. She was tall, red-faced, with arms built by years of pressing linen. "Morning, madam," she said. "You shouldn't be here." Marple smiled politely. "I only wish to ask a few questions." Inspector Slack followed, notebook ready, already impatient. "Mrs." Crail wiped her hands on her apron. "If it's about the uniforms, they're all accounted for." Counted twice. Marple's eyes moved over the piles. "Twice," she repeated softly. "That sounds confident." "It is," Mrs. Crail said. 47 cleaned, 47 returned." Marple reached for the nearest stack. Blue aprons folded square. Each carried a sewn label at the inside seam. Initials of the staff. SBLH. TW. Neat and ordinary. Her fingers paused at one missing corner in the stack. 47, you said? "Yes, madam." Marple began counting silently. 1 row, 2, 3, then stopped. 46, she said quietly. Mrs. Crail frowned. "That can't be right," Slack smirked. "Math doesn't lie, Mrs. Crail." The woman huffed and began counting aloud. By the end, her cheeks had turned the color of steam. "One short," she admitted. "But I know every girl who wore them. None missing." Marple examined the last folded piece. A faint thread stuck at the corner blue, matching the one from the balcony. She unfolded it slowly. The cloth smelled faintly of polish and lemon soap. Inside the collar, a label, faded but legible. C.H. Slack leaned forward. "C.H. Who's that?" Mrs. Crail frowned. "No such name here. No one with those initials." Marple folded the apron again. "Then perhaps," she said, gently, "it didn't belong to staff at all." Slack blinked. "You're suggesting what exactly?" Marple looked at him evenly. "That someone outside the staff used a uniform. Perhaps to pass unseen." He stared. "You mean Hollis?" She nodded. "Charles Hollis," she said softly. "The initials fit rather neatly, don't they?" Mrs. Crail gasped. "But why would a guest wear an apron?" Marple turned the fabric in her hands. "To serve, my dear. Not food, but story. A disappearance always needs disguise." Slack tapped his notebook, scowling. "So he dressed like one of the maids?" "Not quite," Marple replied. "He borrowed an apron, perhaps a jacket. Enough to look ordinary. Enough to move freely while we all looked for a man." She folded the apron again, exact and calm. "People forget," she said. "Uniforms hide more than stains." Slack muttered something about nonsense, but he didn't meet her eyes. She handed the apron back to Mrs. Crail. "Keep this one separate," she said quietly. Mrs. Crail nodded, uneasy now. As they left the laundry, the smell of soap trailed behind them. Marple spoke half to herself. "Everyone believes laundry removes evidence." She paused. "But sometimes it presses it neatly in place." The receptionist called them down just before dusk. Her voice shook when she spoke. I found something," she said. Her hands trembled as she held it out. An envelope. Cream paper. Edges yellowed slightly from heat. Name written in dark ink. Miss Marple adjusted her glasses. The handwriting was firm, male, deliberate. Addressed to Mrs. Hollis. Below it 4 words underlined twice. "Do not come." Inspector Slack frowned. "Where was this?" The girl swallowed. "Behind the front counter, sir. It must have slipped between the drawers." Marple took the envelope carefully. No stamp, no postmark. Unsent. Sealed once, now opened. She turned it over. The paper carried a faint scent. Not musty, sweet, lavender. She opened it slowly. Inside, a single pressed violet. Nothing else. No letter, no signature. Slack groaned. Another of your sentimental clues, Miss Marple. She ignored him. Her thumb brushed the flower. Delicate. Fragile veins still visible through the petals, flattened with care. Old, but not ancient. A message in silence, she said softly. Slack snorted. It's a flower. Exactly. She closed the flap again. Men rarely press flowers, Inspector. Not unless they mean to speak without words. He scratched his head. So he wrote to his wife, told her not to come, then forgot to post it. Or someone meant us to think he did. Her eyes narrowed. The handwriting is strong, but the strokes stop short. See here, the hesitation before each loop. That's not calm writing. That's fear trying to appear orderly. Lady Bantry, who had joined them quietly, leaned in. Do you think he was warning her? Marple nodded. Possibly. Or warning someone else watching. Slack rolled his eyes. Or maybe it's nothing at all. People leave all sorts of nonsense lying about. Marple folded the violet back into the envelope, perfectly aligned. People do. But nonsense doesn't hide behind a counter. The receptionist spoke again, voice small. It wasn't there yesterday, ma'am. I clean the desk every night. Marple looked at her. Then someone placed it recently. The girl nodded. Maybe this morning. Slack frowned deeper. That would mean after he vanished? Yes, Marple said. She studied the faint fingerprints on the edge. Smudged, not clear. The paper still carries warmth, she murmured. He handled it not long ago, or someone who wanted his scent upon it. Slack leaned on the desk. You think the violet means something? Marple smiled faintly. Fear smells of lavender, Inspector. Always has. It's the perfume of polite concealment. He frowned. You mean a woman? Perhaps, she said. Or a man who borrowed her grace. The envelope lay between them, quiet as breath. Marple pressed it flat with her palm. Love letters confess, she said. This one apologizes. Slack blinked. Apologizes for what? She turned to leave. For what hasn't yet been forgiven. The faint lavender lingered in the air as she walked away. Slack stared after her, uneasy, the violet burning in his mind like a mark. The arrest came before breakfast. Quick. Loud. Wrong. Inspector Slack stood in the servants' corridor, chest out, voice booming. I warned you, Miss Marple. Simple crimes, simple minds. 2 constables waited behind him. The housemaid, young and terrified, sat on her cot. Her hands clutched her apron like a shield. From the small drawer beside her bed, Slack drew a velvet pouch. He opened it triumphantly. Inside, a brooch glittered in the dim light. Silver, oval, with a small violet stone in the center. Found right here, he said. Belongs to Lady Bantry. Missing since last night. Marple stood in the doorway. Quiet, still as thought. Her eyes moved slowly from Slack to the maid. The girl's voice broke. I swear, I've never seen it before. Someone put it there. Slack waved her off. That's what they all say. Lady Bantry appeared behind them, flustered, pale. That's mine indeed, Inspector. It was on my dresser. She looked at the maid, confused. But why? Slack cut her off. Motive enough. Theft, then panic, then lies. Easy pattern. Marple stepped closer. May I? She asked softly. Slack hesitated. Knock yourself out. She took the brooch gently, held it to the light, turned it once, twice. Her fingers traced the edges, slow, careful. The metal was polished, but uneven near the clasp. She pressed it slightly. It gave under, her thumb soft. Glue. Faint, but fresh. She spoke without looking up. Lady Bantry, did your brooch ever have a tag? Bantry frowned. Yes, the little store label from London. It came with a paper seal. Gone now, Marple said. She pointed at the faint line near the clasp. Something was pulled off and replaced. Very recently. Slack crossed his arms. So she tried to sell it, removed the tag, thought she'd get away with it. Case closed. Marple looked up at him, her tone calm. The glue hasn't hardened yet. Whoever touched it did so less than an hour ago. The maid's been locked in since dawn. Slack's smirk faltered. Marple continued, turning the clasp once more. The weight is wrong, too. A maid's hand doesn't polish silver this well. But someone wanted this to shine, to be found quickly, like bait. She placed the brooch back in the pouch, closed it neatly, and handed it to Slack. "Planted," she murmured. "A scene arranged." Slack's jaw tightened. "You're saying someone framed her?" "Yes," Marple said. "Not to hide theft, but to redirect suspicion. You've been handed a trail, Inspector. A false one." The maid sobbed quietly, her shoulders shaking. Lady Bantry reached out to comfort her, guilt flickering in her eyes. Marple looked at the floor. Dust marks near the bed. Boot prints. Too large for the girl's shoes. Fresh. She spoke again, voice barely above a whisper. "Your thief wears polished soles, Inspector. Not service shoes." Slack turned, following her gaze. Silence filled the corridor. For once, he had nothing clever to say. Marple adjusted her hat. "Truth," she said softly. "Hates noise. That's why it hides beneath the quiet." Then she walked past him, light, steady and certain. The wind had changed by evening. Colder, sharper. The sea threw mist across the pier, wrapping everything in silver haze. Boats rocked against their ropes, creaking softly. The smell of fish and salt clung to the air like memory. Miss Marple walked slowly along the planks. Inspector Slack trailed behind, coat collar turned up, muttering about drafts. They found the fisherman near the end of the pier, sitting on an overturned crate. His net lay across his knees. His pipe glowed faintly in the fog. Slack flashed his badge, unnecessarily proud. "Name?" "Jonas," the man said without looking up. "Jonas Pike." "You said you saw something last night," Slack said. The man nodded. "From my boat. About sunset. I saw the hotel balcony." Marple stepped forward. Her voice was gentle. "What did you see, Mr. Pike?" He squinted through the mist, recalling the picture. "Two people, on the balcony of that fancy hotel room. One of them wore white, like the kitchen girls wear. The other, taller, dark coat." "Could you tell who they were?" Slack asked. The man shook his head. "Too far. The fog was starting to roll in, but I saw movement. They leaned close. Then I heard something drop. Metal, maybe. Then silence." He tapped his pipe against the railing. "When I looked again, only one was left. Hard to say which." Slack made a note. "Could have been the maid. Could have been Hollis." Pike nodded slowly. "Maybe both. But only one walked back inside." Marple's gaze didn't move from his hands. They were weathered, steady, used to ropes and lines. "Tell me," she said quietly. "When they stood by the railing, did you notice which side the taller one used?" He frowned. "Side?" "Yes," she said. "Which hand held the rail?" He thought a moment, then raised his left hand. "Like this," he said. She was, or he was leaning just so. Left hand on the bar, right arm free. Slack raised an eyebrow. "Why's that matter?" Marple's answer was calm. "Because Mr. Hollis was right-handed." The fisherman looked at her, puzzled. Slack groaned. "Here we go again." She ignored him. "If Hollis leaned left-handed," she said, "he was pretending, or someone was pretending for him." She stepped closer to the rail, testing its height. "See, Inspector, the body's balance tells truth the mouth forgets. A right-handed man favors his right side naturally. He holds steady with the right, gestures with the left, unless he's staging something for someone watching." Slack frowned. "You're saying whoever the fisherman saw wasn't Hollis?" "I'm saying," she replied softly, "our right-handed man staged it left-handed, for appearance, for witnesses." The fog thickened, swallowing the last of the Sunday. Somewhere a bell tolled once, hollow and distant. Marple turned to Pike. "You did well to notice, Mr. Pike. Few people see what hands reveal." He nodded, still uncertain. Slack scribbled, irritated. Marple looked back toward the hotel balcony, glowing faintly through the mist. A single shape, still visible, then gone. "Left-handed," she murmured. "Deliberately wrong, and wrong things, Inspector. Always lead home." Evening deepened. The corridor outside room 12 had emptied. Only the sound of the sea and the faint tick of the hallway clock remained. Miss Marple stood by the open balcony door, gloves on, expression thoughtful. Inspector Slack leaned against the wall, arms crossed, looking unimpressed. "You've stared at that latch for an hour," he said. "Because it still tells lies," she answered. She reached into a knitting bag. From it, she drew a length of fine wire. Old, soft, flexible. Slack frowned. "Going to sew the crime shut, are we?" "Something close to that," she murmured. She knelt beside the door. The latch hung open, metal faintly tarnished where it had been forced. She fed the wire through the small gap between the door and the frame. The wind rattled against the glass, testing her patience. But her hands were steady. Slack shifted uneasily. "What's that supposed to prove?" Marple didn't answer yet. She twisted the wire once, caught it on the latch pin and tugged. There was a small, crisp sound click. The latch fell into place. Perfect, tight, secure. Slack blinked. "You locked it? From outside?" Marple rose slowly, brushing dust from her skirt. "Yes," she said, with nothing more than patience and string. He moved closer, tested the handle. It wouldn't budge. His eyes narrowed. "You mean anyone could have done that?" "Anyone clever enough to plan the performance," she said softly. "Especially someone who wanted a mystery instead of a murder." Slack rubbed his temple. "So he didn't fall?" "No." She looked at the balcony, the railing glistening faintly under the lantern light. "Someone wished us to believe he did." He frowned. "But the footprints—" "Salt," she interrupted. "Scattered deliberately. A signal for the story. A false trail for the careless eye." Slack exhaled hard. "So he staged his own death, disguised himself, walked away." She shook her head. "Too tidy. A true disappearance rarely stays clean. Someone else finished the illusion." She walked back to the tray on the table. The bent teaspoon still rested there. She touched it lightly. Every detail supports the same fiction. A vanished man. A locked room. A mystery meant to distract. Slack followed her gaze. "Then who did it?" She looked out toward the dark sea. "Who benefits from silence, Inspector?" "Always start there." He didn't reply. The waves answered for him low, constant, hiding what they carried. Marple lifted the wire again, coiling it neatly into her palm. "Locked rooms," she said quietly, "only require patience." She looked at him then, eyes sharp under the softness. "But deceit, Inspector, deceit requires design." Slack said nothing. The door stayed. Locked, just as before. Marple turned away, her voice barely above a whisper. "Someone built this puzzle to be admired, not solved." She paused, listening to the surf below. "And that," she added, "tells me exactly who." The drawing room felt smaller that evening. No laughter now, only murmurs and the faint hiss of the fire. Lady Bantry sat near the hearth, twisting her pearls. She looked pale, thoughtful, uneasy. Miss Marple sat opposite, teacup untouched. Inspector Slack stood by the window, impatient as ever. "Another rumor," he grumbled. "That's all we've had since morning." Lady Bantry shook her head. "This one's different, Inspector. I heard it myself last week." Marple looked up. "Go on, my dear." Bantry hesitated, glancing toward the door, then lowered her voice. "Mr. Hollis had been asking questions about the hotel accounts. The ledgers. He said something was wrong, figures that didn't add up." Slack snorted. "Everyone complains about bills." "Not like that," Lady Bantry said sharply. "He said he could prove the books were false." Marple's knitting lay silent in her lap. Her eyes sharpened. "False accounts," she said softly. "Then someone had reason to keep him quiet." Slack rubbed his chin. "The owner? You think he cooked the numbers?" "Possibly," Marple said. "But not alone. Money rarely moves without a hand to carry it." Lady Bantry leaned forward. "There's more. The owner's niece, Miss Evelyn Dane, she settled a large debt last month. Cash. No one knows from where." Slack raised an eyebrow. "She's the one running the front desk?" "Yes." Pretty thing. Always smells of lavender. Marple's eyes flickered. Lavender again. The letter. The violet. The glove. She rose without a word. Walked to the hall. The scent met her halfway sweet. Faint. Too deliberate. Miss Dane stood behind the counter, smiling politely. Evening. Miss Marple. Can I help you? Marple returned the smile. I believe you already have, my dear. Her gaze moved to the gloves on the desk. Cream, colored, soft, one edge faintly stained. She picked it up gently. The scent was unmistakable. Violet, the same as the letter, the same as the pressed flower. She turned the glove inside out. Fine dust along the seam powder from bookkeeping ledgers. Not a maid's glove, a clerk's. Used to counting, not cleaning. Slack appeared behind her. What now? Marple handed him the glove. Smell it. He frowned, but obeyed. Perfume, he said. Lavender. And ink. She nodded. Forged books, she murmured. And now, forged death. Slack blinked. Meaning? She and Hollis worked together. He found the false accounts. Perhaps even helped write them. But greed is impatient, Inspector. Someone wanted all of it. Slack stared at the glove again. So, she killed him? Marple's tone stayed level. She created the illusion. Whether he died by her hand or another's, she ensured the story drowned beneath beauty and perfume. Lady Bantry appeared in the doorway. Jane? You're certain? Marple looked at her. No one who hides numbers hides them alone. Miss Dane's hands smell of money disguised as flowers. Slack tossed the glove onto the desk, disgusted. Too neat for my taste. Marple smiled faintly. Neatness, Inspector, is guilt's favorite costume. She turned toward the corridor, the faint scent of violet still clinging to the air. Behind her, Slack muttered under his breath. Marple only whispered to herself. Ledgers lie when fear keeps the ink wet. Night came hard. Rain swept across the coast in sudden sheets. The sea rose high, grey and heavy. Lanterns swung along the pier, their light breaking and reforming with each gust. The hotel windows glowed faintly through the storm, small islands of warmth in the dark. Miss. Marple stood near the seawall, umbrella useless against the wind. Inspector Slack was beside her, soaked and scowling. This is madness, he shouted over the surf. No one's out there now. She didn't answer. Her eyes stayed on the water. Something moved between the waves. Something small. A fisherman's shout carried across the pier. Boat coming in, no lights. Slack turned sharply. The dark outline of a dinghy drifted toward the dock. One oar floated beside it, the other missing. No figure inside. No sound except the slap of water against wood. They hurried forward. The rain hit harder. Slack caught the edge of the rope and pulled the boat in. It bumped the pier once, twice, then settled. Empty. Except for a coat. Marple's gaze fixed on it instantly. Dark wool, soaked through, heavy with rain. A violet pinned neatly to the lapel. Slack lifted it out. His, he said. Charles Hollis. Even got the initials stitched inside. Marple stepped closer. The flower still held its scent. Faint but clear. Violet again. He never left by sea, she said quietly. Slack looked at her, confused. But the footprints... Fake, she cut in. The salt trail led here, not from here. Someone wanted the tide to tell their story. Slack turned the coat over. The pockets were empty. No papers, no watch, just a thread hanging from the sleeve. Blue. Hotel uniform blue. Marple touched it. Disguise, she murmured. He frowned. What do you mean? She straightened, voice calm against the storm. He left this behind so we'd chase the sea. But he walked away from land dressed as one of the staff. He vanished in plain sight. Slack blinked. You're saying he's alive? I'm saying, she replied. Someone helped him look dead. The fisherman joined them, panting from the run. No one could row in this weather, he said. Boat must have drifted from the harbour. Marple nodded. Set loose to float back. An illusion of tragedy. Slack looked again at the coat. The violets swayed in the wind. He cursed under his breath. So this whole thing's a trick. Marple's tone stayed steady. No, Inspector. A transaction. Someone paid for silence with deception. Lightning flashed over the water, white and sharp. For a moment, the sea looked alive, hundreds of moving hands reaching up. Marple watched without blinking. When the light faded, her voice returned to its calm rhythm. "He never left by sea," she said again. "He left by disguise, and those who helped him are still watching the shore." Slack stared into the darkness, unable to argue. The wind howled once more, carrying the faint scent of violets back to land. The lounge was silent. The storm had passed, but the air inside still felt charged. A dozen faces turned toward Miss Marple as she took her seat by the fire. Her hands rested lightly on her knitting bag. Inspector Slack stood near the mantel, tapping his notebook, pretending calm. Lady Bantry poured tea no one would drink. Marple looked up. Her voice was steady. "Mr. Hollis never vanished," she said. The room stirred. Slack frowned. "Then where is he?" She folded her hands. "He was here the whole time. He simply changed places." A gasp moved through the group. "The waiter," she continued. "The thin man who served tea the afternoon of his disappearance, that wasn't the regular waiter. That was Mr. Hollis himself." Slack blinked. "You're saying he swapped uniforms?" Marple nodded. "He used the missing apron marked C.H., his own initials. He slipped into the role after staging the locked room scene." Lady Bantry leaned forward, pale. "But why, Jane? Why such trouble?" "To escape suspicion," Marple said. "He discovered the forged hotel ledgers and tried to use them. A little extortion, perhaps. But he overplayed his hand. The niece, Miss Dane, stood to lose everything. She agreed to help him disappear. She even wrote the note to his wife. "Do not come." It wasn't warning. It was closure. Slack's pencil hovered. "So they were partners?" "For a time," she said, "but greed rarely shares a plate." She looked toward the door, where the hotel staff lingered nervously. After he staged his vanishing act, he planned to leave by night dressed as staff, carrying the forged ledgers in his pocket. But Miss Dane was quicker. She lured him down to the cold storage room under the kitchen, pretending it was the safest exit to the loading yard. Lady Bantry shuddered. Marple's voice softened. She locked the door behind him. No struggle, just stillness. Slack swallowed hard. "He suffocated?" "Yes." Marple's tone didn't waver. "Not drowned, not missing, hidden, neatly, behind the smell of ice and lemons." Slack muttered a curse. "The freezer, of course. We searched every floor but the basement." Marple nodded. "Because no one thinks to look for death among the living's tools." Miss Dane sat in the corner, face drained of colour. She tried to speak, failed. Marple turned to her, voice still gentle. "He hid behind Service," she said, "and Service betrayed him." The girl's hands trembled. Tears didn't come, only silence. Slack gave the order quietly. Two constables stepped forward. The rain had started again outside, light and distant. Marple looked down at her knitting. Her needles clicked once, twice, steady as thought. Lady Bantry whispered, "Jane, how do you see such things?" Marple smiled faintly. "Because people," she said, "forget that deceit, like thread, always knots where it begins." The fire crackled. The case was closed. But the scent of violet still lingered in the air, sweet, deceptive, and hard to forget. Morning broke slow. Grey light touched the edges of the curtains. The sea outside was quiet again, though restless beneath. The storm had washed the night clean, but not the minds inside the Grand Seaview Hotel. Inspector Slack stood by the window, hands in his pockets. He looked tired, defeated in that stubborn way only pride allows. Lady Bantry sat on the sofa, her eyes fixed on the fading fire. Miss Marple was near the window, calm as the tide returning. No one spoke for a long while. Finally, Slack cleared his throat. "You were right, Miss Marple." His voice came out rough. He looked at her, then down. "I don't know how you do it. You see everything, quiet things most of us step on." Marple smiled faintly. "Not everything, Inspector. Just what people leave untidy." He nodded, awkward. I'll see to the niece. The Ledgers will go to the station. A pity. I rather liked her. She liked money more, Marple said softly. Slack gave a small grunt of agreement. She'll talk before the night's over. I expect she will, Marple replied. But guilt has its own way of speaking long before the mouth does. Lady Bantry sighed. Her voice was low, weary. Such a dreadful business, Jane, all for numbers in a book. Marple turned toward her. Human nature, my dear, is remarkably consistent. The amounts may change, but the motive rarely does. The clock on the mantel ticked steadily. Each sound seemed louder now, each second sharper. The fire hissed once and went quiet. The room carried only the scent of damp wood and salt. Marple looked out the window. The horizon had cleared. The waves rolled in softly, each one folding into the next with perfect calm. Somewhere a gull called once, faint and distant. She watched the movement without blinking. Guilt, she said softly, always drifts back with the tide. Lady Bantry followed her gaze. The sea looked harmless now, beautiful even, but they both knew what it had tried to hide. She whispered, "Do you think she'll ever be free of it?" "No," Marple said gently. Guilt returns in silence, always when the world grows still enough to hear it. Slack moved toward the door. "Best I be off," he said. He stopped once, looked back. "You make it sound simple, Miss Marple. But it's not, is it?" "No," she answered. "It's never simple, just obvious once seen." He nodded, touched his hat, and left. The sound of his boots faded down the hall. Lady Bantry reached for her tea. It had gone cold. Marple didn't move. Her eyes stayed on the sea, her thoughts far beyond it. The clock ticked. The rain began again, soft, steady, certain. No voices now, no sound but rhythm. The sea breathed, the house settled, and truth at last was quiet. Evening settled over Street Mary Mead. Rain eased to a hush. Miss Marple's cottage glowed softly through the lace curtains. Inside, the kettle hummed. Steam curled like thought. She set out 2 cups, one for herself, one left cooling across the table. The clock ticked. Needles clicked. Wool gathered neatly in her lap. Outside, the sea could not be heard, yet its rhythm lingered in her mind. Faces came and went behind her eyes. Lady Bantry, Inspector Slack, the girl with violet scent. Each had spoken their truth. Each had hidden another. She poured the tea, steady, precise, watched the steam fade, smiled faintly. "For guests who never quite leave," she whispered. The fire cracked once, soft and final. Her knitting resumed, calm, certain. "Truth," she murmured, "cools slower than tea," and the room, like her heart, stayed warm a little longer.